That's the way that I look at it. And you know, I could say 20 years ago, I regret I didn't do this, I regret I didn't do that, but I wouldn't be here now, 20 years later, okay, if it wasn't for the journey that I went through. Does that make sense?
I think I've learned that my current thinking process or following behavior is largely affected by past,
yes,
or like particular some kind of trauma.
Yes.
Well, if I have like identified the trauma or bad memories,
yes,
and my question is how to practically to overcome this trauma.
yes.
And my second question is you mentioned that the changing paradigm. Changing paradigm is like a changing habits.
Yes.
But we all live in a kind of inertia that this is really hard to change.
Absolutely,
the habits.
very hard.
Yes, and the comment to this two question is my question is practically how to.
Yeah. Brilliant question, number two. I haven't got a whole day to do that, I'm afraid. I'll go through. So the first part of the question, which is that a trauma that you've had, a traumatic event, you know, how do I, obviously this is where, with trauma therapy, you know, if it's quite a significant traumatic event, this is where really you need some specialist type of counselling. What that counselling will enable you to identify is that the root cause, the traumatic event, and how it has what I call a psychodynamic effect. That it has a dynamic effect in terms of your current behaviour. So then you yourself know now that how that experience, for example, has created fear and anxiety in other parts of my life. Now knowing that is very important. And also what you learn from that is the triggers and the events and situations then that cause you to become anxious or vulnerable, you know, in situations because of that event. So that knowledge is very, very powerful. But you're right, knowledge doesn't mean, knowledge is power if it's put into practice. Yeah? So we've got to overcome a inertia, a habit, behavior that's been formed, maybe over many, many years, that we can't break. How do I overcome inertia? And it's, again, this is where different therapists will use different kind of techniques. But the techniques really boil down to a couple of very simple concepts. And the first concept is this. Continuing you as you are, just like I mentioned about the doctor who's unhappy. Can you continue as you are? The pain of continuing with the same situation, is this acceptable? And for most people will say, no, the pain is unacceptable. It causes too much pain and difficulty now. So that should be enough to start getting the motivation that's required in order to overcome the inertia. But also it's about breaking it down into, so when I'm working with an individual, I'm giving people a small exercise every week. Each individual is different. Some people do a big thing. You change like that. They have enough motivation. So I've seen drug addicts change in one day and others over 5 years, gradually. So each one is individual's unit, and motivation is the big, big driver. Let me tell you one of the big motivators in life. What do you think is one of the big motivators in life? Let me ask you, what do you think is one of the big motivator in life? Okay. How about your mortality? Life and death. Yeah. That's a big motivator. Okay. Well, all right. Okay. You know, you're right. It's abstract. It's abstract. But for a lot of people, the fact that we're only on this earth, and unfortunately I haven't got the time, there's an exercise where when I break down a 70-year life, do you know after eating, sleeping, drinking, and your work, do you know you've only got 8 years of your life that's spent in doing things which you really love to do? 8 years. Really. And I think Korean society, you work even harder. So probably about 6 years. We spend how many hours eating, sleeping, drinking, and resting and working a day? How many? Out of 24 hours, we spend 18 hours a day just doing that stuff. That means 6 hours. And 6 hours, most people don't spend those 6 hours doing what? Relaxing, downtime. Okay? Those are 6 hours that you have, and 6 hours to make a change. That's your time. And if you break that into a 7-year life, into a 70-year life, that breaks down to, like I said, 8 years, 6 to 8 years. So you've only got 6 to 8 years, really, of those happy, joyous moments with your family, with your kids, holidays and things like that. So it's not much. Why ruin those that time, yeah? Okay, so that's one way to look at mortality, you know. But mortality is a big motivator. But it's what is it? I'm looking for the motivation. Is it family? Is it friends? Is it your children? Whatever the motivation is, that motivation has to be strong enough. But fundamentally, the motivation is, is you becoming a complete human being. Really, that's what it is. It's you being a happy, well-balanced individual. Because you realize my life is out of control. It's not in my control. That's what we've all been saying. If 80% of my life is dictated by this problem, I want to be in control of my life, not my problem dictating to me and defining who I am. So that really should be the fundamental motivator for me to overcome the inertia, to be able to change the habit. You've got to force yourself to do it. You know, otherwise, like I said, and this is the difference between Julius and most people. Most people, like I said, will only force if there's an absolute crisis, life and death, in front of me. Okay, but if you really break down your life and you look at the reality of your life and how long you actually have, the most important commodity that you have, although you might think that, the most important commodity that you have is time. And I always say this to you. You hear this, and I don't know if you hear this in Korean society. Do you hear time is money? You hear that? People say that? What do you think? Do you think it makes sense? Time is money? Yeah. It's a lie. Okay? Time is more precious than money can ever be. Because time can never be recovered. Yeah? Time is a millisecond gone, can never be recovered. Whereas money can be recovered. Time is critical. Really. It's the most precious commodity that you have. Don't waste it. Okay. Any more?
Thank you.
Yeah. Can't see. Okay.
Yeah, my question is, when a person is, you can say, emotionally isolated, and maybe there can be a situation that when you think that your ideas and your thoughts are blocked by the problem, I mean, you cannot see over that problem, and your ideas are just black out because of that problems. How to overcome that kind of situation?
Yeah. Okay, this tends to happen when you're right. Your whole an idea, an experience defines everything. You cannot see reality beyond that. That is your whole paradigm. How do you get people to see different perspectives? And in many ways, it's the whole process of having that dialogue with an individual. I said, start that conversation. Have that conversation. Ask them about the idea. Ask them why. Tell them, get them to talk about. And you'll find that the solution will be there, and then the skill is to nurture and channel that into a positive way, into some kind of a positive direction. So you'll find that even with a person who has what we call tunnel vision, and has what we call, overriding thoughts, which are defining everything about them, you can still break down the logic of that, just through dialogue, befriending, comfort, and support. Now, what generally happens, however, is that when a nice individual becomes isolated, because people can't have that discussion with someone, okay, they'll abandon, they'll try, find it difficult, leave that person, and when you abandon an individual, what do you do but leave them to the idea? Does that make sense? That idea becomes even stronger and stronger. What I find with the people that I work with, what makes it so successful is what I call continuity and longevity. The people I work with, I don't just come in one day and go the next day. If I have an involvement with them for 1 year and 2 years, and I'm calling them up as a mentor, how are you, they realize I'm a continuous presence in their life. I keep involved with them. This is the key thing about emotional intelligence and support. You don't just parachute into someone's life and then parachute out. Because then that actually destabilizes a person even more. And equally, I find it really difficult. The guy's got weird ideas. I'll abandon him and leave him to his ideas. That doesn't help either. But if you're constantly there, eventually you'll find that continuous presence of being involved positively in someone's life means that you start having an impact in terms of kind of trying to shape their ideas. And what I find is that when you abandon people, when you leave them to isolation, then that makes them even more vulnerable and makes their ideas develop even more. That's why, again, one of the key things I mentioned yesterday in terms of the skill for working with people as a counsellor at an emotional level is compassion. Be good at, in terms of having techniques of engagement, but also you've got to have compassion. You've got to care about human beings. When you care about human beings, and the person realizes that, and that shows your involvement in them, then you can see you have a positive impact on them.